Thank you for watching this presentation on the new HABIC PALS program. This presentation will go over what the program is, what it takes to become a PALS leader, and how COVID-19 is affecting the program. This is Kate Miller speaking. I'm one of the animal trainers and volunteer coordinators here at HABIC, and I'll be narrating this presentation today. Generally speaking, the HABIC PALS program is designed to subdivide HABIC volunteers into small groups of about 5 to 10 volunteers each. These people ideally volunteer in the same agency, or at least the same type of agency. They are also located in the same geographic area. Each group will have a PALS leader. PALS leaders are experienced HABIC volunteers. They model the human-animal bond with their own animals, and they create great relationships with other people. These HABIC volunteers stand out as excellent role models and are invited to become PALS leaders. If you accept the role of becoming a PALS leader, you are willing to take on some extra responsibility in helping to onboard and mentor new volunteers. We'll break down the additional time requirements later on in this presentation, but in general, PALS leaders can expect to volunteer about an extra hour per week. However, during onboarding, there will be some additional time requirements of about 1 to 2 hours per week for several weeks. Finally, we do ask that PALS leaders commit to at least 1 year of being a leader. Before we get too far in this presentation, we want to clear up some of the differences between our programs. There are 3 main ways that volunteers can become more involved in HABIC. These include the Advisory Council, the Program Support Committee, also known as the PS Committee, and the PALS program. Let's quickly look at the difference between the Program Support Committee and the PALS program. PALS leaders will help newly certified HABIC volunteers to become comfortable as they begin volunteering. This is done through the onboarding process. After the new volunteer is onboarded, the PALS leader will continue to have a relationship with them by checking in with them periodically. The PALS leader plays a large role in getting the new volunteer started and then maintains a relationship with them throughout their time as a volunteer. In contrast, a Program Support Committee member will do a one-time observation of the team. The PS Committee member sees the team in a snapshot of time. They are not involved in the onboarding process, and they do not typically maintain a long-term relationship with the volunteer. Now we can go into how the PALS program will work under normal conditions without the COVID-19 pandemic. PALS leaders will be involved in providing shadowing, mentoring, and offering continued support. We'll go into each of these in more detail in the following slides. The first thing a PALS leader will do is provide a shadowing opportunity for new volunteers. The new volunteer will come and shadow the PALS leader as the leader does their regular volunteer shift. This typically happens while the new volunteer is in training before they have become certified. The new volunteer does not have their dog with them. They are simply there to gain a better understanding of what it means to volunteer at the agency and gain a better understanding of whether this agency will be a good fit for them. Since the shadowing opportunity occurs during the leader's regular volunteer shift, there is no additional time requirement for this piece of the PALS program. After a new volunteer has been certified and begins volunteering, the PALS leader is present during the new volunteer's first 3 shifts. The PALS leader does not have their dog with them. The PALS leader is there to make sure the new volunteer knows where they are going in the agency, knows the protocols, and the PALS leader is there in case the new volunteer has any questions. This aspect of the PALS program is the most time-intensive for PALS leaders. Leaders will help onboard up to 1 to 2 volunteers per cohort. This means that the time requirement for the PALS leaders will be about 1 to 2 hours each week for several weeks. Onboarding happens twice a year, but it is unlikely that PALS leaders will receive new members to their group with every onboarding cycle. So most likely, PALS leaders will only help with onboarding about once a year. From there, PALS leaders will continue to offer support to the volunteer. PALS leaders are available to answer questions, and they check in periodically with the volunteer to see how they are doing. The goal is that the PALS program can help foster a sense of camaraderie among volunteers. These check-ins will likely occur over text, call, or email and are not expected to add a large amount of time to the leader's weekly volunteer time. We want to pause here and discuss the question of, what if my animal is retired? Don't worry, if your animal is retired, you can still be a PALS leader. HABIC staff will work with you to coordinate a shadowing opportunity with an active HABIC team. From there, your responsibilities as a PALS leader would be the same. The typical role of the PALS program, which we outlined in the previous slides, cannot take place during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, there are still ways that PALS leaders can connect with existing volunteers, even during the pandemic. During the pandemic, PALS leaders can begin building relationships with the volunteers assigned to them. Each PALS leader will be assigned 5 to 10 existing HABIC volunteers. The leaders will simply reach out to these existing volunteers over phone, email, or Zoom. Leaders can introduce themselves and explain that they are available to offer additional support to volunteers. This process can be spread out over several weeks and is expected to add less than 1 hour per week to the time requirement of PALS leaders. The main goal here is for PALS leaders to begin establishing rapport with their group. PALS leaders can also help connect volunteers with new resources and materials as HABIC develops them. We all know that mass emails are easily missed, so PALS leaders will help to forward emails written by HABIC staff. PALS leaders also might reach out to their group and ask something like, "Did you see that HABIC is starting up in-person visits at the hospital? That sounds like it would be right up your alley." Or, "HABIC is offering a new volunteer training class. It sounds like a great fit for you and Fluffy." Note that PALS leaders are not responsible for creating the material, only for passing it along to volunteers. Especially when it comes to technology and policy updates, PALS leaders don't need to be experts. They simply pass along the information and are available to direct volunteers to HABIC staff if there are questions and concerns. We are so excited to begin this new program, especially during the pandemic. The pandemic is well known to be a time of isolation for many people, and so beginning the PALS program now is a great way to connect people when they might need it the most. We will go over the next step for the PALS program in the following slides. If you choose to move forward with becoming a PALS leader, you will be assigned a group of 5 to 10 existing HABIC volunteers. You will be encouraged to reach out to each member of your PALS group and introduce yourself. The time requirement for this will greatly vary depending on the preference of each PALS leader. Leaders can choose to send an email, which will likely take much less than an hour. Alternatively, leaders could choose to have phone or Zoom calls with each member of their PALS group. If leaders choose this option, the time requirement will be significantly longer. There is no correct way to complete this step. It totally depends on the preference of each PALS leader. HABIC staff will work with all the PALS leaders to disseminate training materials and resources to their volunteers. Most often, PALS leaders will text, call, or email the members of their PALS group to ask if they received the training materials. This should only take a couple of minutes and won't occur every week. PALS leaders will check in with HABIC staff at least monthly to see how the program is going. This will likely occur via email, but do note that HABIC staff will be available to talk over the phone as well. This should only take a couple of minutes and will only happen once a month. Finally, we want to recognize the amazing efforts being made by our PALS leaders. This is a huge role that will so greatly improve the HABIC program. We couldn't do it without you. In addition to our gratitude, we would also like to feature all of our PALS leaders on the HABIC website. You can be sure that leaders will also be endowed with gear such as customized name badges and likely other fun HABIC swag as well. Thank you so much for watching this presentation, and thank you for being willing to help us embark with this new program. We believe it will go a long way in creating a better volunteer experience for all of our volunteers, so thank you.